Where was the most bizarre finance class of World War II held? Not on Wall Street, nor in the city of London. It was behind the barbed wire of Stalag 7A near Moosburg, Germany inside. 50,000 Allied soldiers turned cigarettes into currency and forged trust into a life-saving commodity. This is the story of how basic economic principles governed survival in the Nazis' largest prison camp.
By 1943, Stalag 7A was a boiling cauldron of humanity. The Nazis crammed French, British, American, and Soviet soldiers together, stripping them of liberty and supply chains. The camp's size dramatically amplified the chaos. Stalag 7A was operating at 5 times its design capacity of 10,000 men. It was severely overcrowded with soldiers from France, 38,000, Britain, 12,000, the United States, 8,000, and the Soviet Union, 14,300. This multinational mix created unequal conditions. Due to labor agreements, French POWs were generally allowed greater movement and even established fixed trading centers. In contrast, British and American soldiers were restricted and often required to bribe guards, typically with 1 cigarette per pass, to move between sectors and trade. Yet even in this deliberate chaos, a rudimentary market emerged. A can of salmon might fetch 2 cigarettes at the east end of a barracks and 5 at the west. This was a market desperately in need of structure. While men argued over the salmon price disparity, Thomas knelt beside the crude price list, calculating intently. He then stood up and addressed the crowd. When I managed foreign exchange at the London Bank, I faced similar issues with different rates in different locations. The problem here isn't a lack of goods, it's a lack of a universal set of rules we all agree upon. Then came Thomas White, a pre-war foreign exchange banker from London. His priority wasn't just his own sustenance, it was establishing a life-saving system of rules. The cigarette became the camp's hard currency. The Red Cross issued supplies based on the standard of 1 ounce of pipe tobacco for 25 cigarettes. Crucially, that ounce of tobacco could be rolled into up to 30 hand-rolled cigarettes. This provided a natural anchor of value that non-smokers were willing to accept. This widespread acceptance was personal. Miller, a U.S. soldier who never smoked, famously pasted a note next to Thomas's price list. I traded 15 cigarettes I saved over 3 weeks for 1 bar of soap. It was easier than running through 3 barracks trying to barter for bread. The next day, 3 signatures of "I concur" were added below his note. The cigarette was easier to carry than soap. Today's purchase could be tomorrow's bread. Thomas took the lead, formalizing the exchange rate. He posted the first official price list on the barrack door. 1 factory-made cigarette for 2 slices of bread. 3 tightly rolled handmade cigarettes would equal 2 factory-made ones. However, the system quickly faced a classical economic challenge: Gresham's Law. Everyone hoarded the high-quality, factory-sealed cigarettes, like the Churchman's No. 1s, hiding them under their pillows. It was the classic phenomenon of good money being driven out by bad money, much like modern citizens hoarding gold and spending paper currency. Nobody wanted to spend the good money first. Soon, the camp saw hardly any factory cigarettes. The hand-rolled substitutes became so loose that tobacco began to fall out, appearing more and more like counterfeit money. Thomas adjusted the rules. 3 tightly rolled cigarettes equaled 2 factory ones, but 4 loose ones only equaled 1. He understood that even an ephemeral currency like a cigarette needed credit endorsement. Arbitrage became the mechanism for price stabilization. Thomas discovered that British POWs disliked coffee. A small packet of coffee essence cost only 2 cigarettes in their sector, yet it fetched 5 in the French sector. By paying a 1 cigarette bribe to a guard for passage, he earned a 2 cigarette margin. Thomas used his profits to stabilize the market. He wasn't just seeking personal gain, he was the market's fair trader, ensuring prices didn't spiral out of control. Early 1944 brought a deeper crisis. Allied bombing had cut supply lines, initiating a period of deflation. The purchasing power of a single cigarette jumped from 2 slices of bread to 4. Deflation was like money rapidly increasing in value, yet no one dared to spend it. Men would rather starve than spend their dwindling cigarette reserves on non-essentials. Even the bustling French trading centers grew quiet. Previously, 1 cigarette might buy a spoonful of sugar, but now it took 2 to make the same purchase. Thomas countered this with a revolutionary concept: credit. Recognizing that many had a guaranteed future allotment of cigarettes, he offered loans. Borrow now and repay with a 10% premium when your next parcel arrives. This credit loan helped many through the shortage, proving that Thomas's rule, his trust, was dependable. The system's true test came on a cold winter night. 22-year-old John was suffering from septicemia. The doctor's diagnosis was stark. Without penicillin, he won't survive 48 hours. The only source was the guards. Their stock of penicillin was typically packaged in 20-milliliter glass vials, sealed with rubber stoppers, often stamped penicillin sodium. The most common presentation in military medical supplies on the 1944 North African and European fronts. The guards demanded a staggering 100 cigarettes. This was the equivalent of 3 cans of beef, or half a month's basic living expenses. The desperate comrades only managed to scrape together 42 cigarettes. Thomas remained calm. He approached Louis, a cautious French POW with a large stash. Thomas pledged to repay the 58 cigarette deficit within 2 months, plus a 10 cigarette monthly interest. He produced his worn notebook, a ledger of every transaction. Louis stared at the meticulous entry. 1943-11-5. Helped Louis exchange 2 cans of chocolate for 10 factory cigarettes. The record of that past favor, when Louis desperately needed cigarettes for frostbite cream, hit him. Louis looked up and clapped Thomas on the shoulder. I needed smokes for my frostbite cream, and you spot me 5 that time. I trust you this time. Thomas then added his own 20 reserve cigarettes, profits from his arbitrage, and negotiated the remaining debt with the guard, using John's future Red Cross parcel as collateral. His gamble wasn't on the quantity of smoke, but on the collective trust within the barbed wire. The penicillin was administered. John recovered. The camp later briefly experimented with a paper currency, the Bullymark Note, BM. These notes, issued by the camp restaurant, were designed to equal 1 cigarette and were 100% backed by commodity collateral, such as a precise fraction of a canned good, e.g. 1/4 of a can of beef. However, the paper currency failed after only 3 weeks. Thomas was entirely unsurprised. The reason for their abandonment was clear. Prisoners feared the notes would be rendered worthless if the camp was suddenly dissolved, and they couldn't redeem their collateral. Thomas recognized the fatal flaw. The core of currency, he said, has never been paper or tobacco, but the public faith in it. On April 29, 1945, the tanks of the U.S. 14th Armored Division smashed through the gates of Stalag. 7 Thomas walked out, his worn notebook in hand, holding a receipt from Louis. Thomas White, repayment 78 cigarettes, credit excellent. The chapter was closed, but the ledger wasn't finished. In 1946, Thomas encountered a fully recovered John on a London street. John handed him a fresh pack of Churchman's No. 1s, the coveted factory-made cigarettes. You saved me with hand-rolled scraps back then, John said. Now I pay you back with the real thing. They opened the notebook. Next to the entry, 1944.15, borrowed 58 cigarettes from Louis. They added a final note, 1946.320, 10 cigarettes repaid by proxy of John. Economist R.A. Radford later documented this system, the cigarette currency, the arbitrage, the credit structure, as a classic case study in his paper, the economic organization of a POW camp. Thomas White's greatest lesson, however, wasn't financial. As he told his grandchildren, the most valuable thing in Moosburg in 1944 wasn't the cigarette, it was the look in Louis's eyes as he handed over the loan, and the sight of John repaying a debt that wasn't even his. Those promises kept in the abyss. Those were the real hard currency. The story of Stalag 7 serves as a profound testament to human ingenuity. Thomas White's credit notebook became a tangible symbol of dependability in a world designed for destruction. His actions weren't just business. They were a lifeline anchored by trust in the rule of law. But the principle remains: finance is, fundamentally, credit. Just as Stalag 7A's Bullymark notes failed because prisoners feared they could not be redeemed upon the camp's dissolution, today the US dollar's credit is under scrutiny. The challenges are manifold. The weaponization of the dollar through sanctions against nations like Russia makes other countries fearful of holding large USD reserves. Much like the POWs who refuse to hold Bullymark notes, combined with the recurring political theater of US government shutdowns and the massive monetary expansion of the recent era, these events collectively challenge the foundational faith in the system. The core logic remains the same. Trust in the issuer is decreasing. The question is, can the dollar's value survive without universal trust in the reliability of its issuers?
We invite you to join this crucial discussion. Tell us in the comments below. Comparing the fragile cigarette currency of Stalag 7A to the modern challenges facing the USD, from the sanctioning of nations like Russia, the recurring government shutdowns, and the excessive monetary expansion of the recent era, what do you believe is the true hard currency in today's global market? Is it gold, new digital currencies, or some deeper form of geopolitical credit? Help us continue to uncover the forgotten lessons of military history and economic theory. Like this video and subscribe to ensure you receive our next deep dive on geopolitical, military, and financial foresight.